The Colorado River Basin is one of the largest on the entire continent. It spans an area of over 640,000 square kilometers. It is home to 35 million people and encompasses a large swath of the American Southwest. The region has a large variety of climate zones, with the areas on the Köppen climate type index ranging from alpine areas to hot and cold deserts. Large population centers sit in the desert-like areas of the American Southwest, such as Las Vegas and Phoenix. As such, the river brings much-needed water for municipal, agricultural, and industrial uses. In the early to mid-1900s, some of the world's largest public works projects of the time were undertaken in an attempt to reclaim and control the water provided by the river. In the upper Colorado Basin, within the states of Arizona, Utah, New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming, the Colorado River Storage Project was undertaken in the late 1950s. These massive projects aim to control the water supply in the basin even in low-flow conditions. The lower basin consists of the states of Arizona, Nevada, California, and 2 Mexican states. The lower basin contains numerous separate reclamation projects without one singular overarching project. The lower basin can generally be described as waters downstream of the reservoir Lake Powell on the Arizona-Utah border, which was created by the Glen Canyon Dam. The other man-made reservoir of the Colorado River is Lake Mead, which was created by the Hoover Dam. Lake Mead is very well known as it sits next to Las Vegas. Lake Powell upstream and Lake Mead downstream sit at either end of the spectacular Grand Canyon. Although significant anthropogenic effects can be seen in the upper basin, most population centers, along with agriculture, rely on works in the lower basin downstream of Lake Mead. We seek to quantify the effects of anthropogenic activity downstream of Lake Mead while taking into account the needs of the large population both in the area and across the continent. With such extensive intervention on the course and flow, anthropogenic influences on the Colorado River have been devastating to the landscape and ecosystem of the area.
In the 1930s, when the United States was going through the Great Depression, it was under the administration of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. To pivot out of their misfortune and jumpstart their failing economy, they began to work on the largest dam ever built, the Hoover Dam. Work began on April 20th, 1931, and ended March 1st of 1936. The scale of the project was massive, as they had to displace the whole Colorado River for over 5 years as they worked. They did this by blasting 3 tunnels underneath the Black Canyon to allow them to build off the river bed directly. When it was done, the Hoover Dam stood at a whopping 222 meters tall and 379 meters wide. This marvel of engineering was even more impressive as they didn't have any form of infrastructure, such as roads and other utilities. Nearly all the materials needed were shipped up the Colorado. A total of 4.4 cubic yards of concrete were used in its creation alone. The Hoover Dam is now the second largest dam in the United States. It spans across the Colorado, and it generates on average about 4 billion kilowatt hours of hydroelectric power each year. It also holds back the man-made reservoir known as Lake Mead. Lake Mead is the largest reservoir by volume in the United States. It was born as a result of the Hoover Dam. It is used to detain water before passing through the dam. As a man-made lake, it's oleotrophic, as it has inordinately steep sides limiting the littoral zone in the lake. This leads to very low production of oxygen with a stable percent of dissolved oxygen throughout the entire lake, which leads to undesirable living habitats for most species of fish, but deep clear water for personal use and providing especially clean drinking water to Nevada. Lake Mead receives the vast majority of its water from the Colorado River, which has been dwindling in recent years due to climate change and human development. The static level of Lake Mead has decreased significantly over the years, with whole portions drying up and the characteristic bathtub rings appearing along its steep shores where water levels once sat. After many unproductive winters, higher max temperatures, and higher water consumption for the growing population of California and Nevada, as well as the fact that Lake Mead loses about 800,000 acre-feet of water through evaporation alone. With these constant stressors, Lake Mead has reached an all-time low unseen since the lake was formed in 1938 and has not rebounded to its average levels since. The Hoover Dam causes a ton of disturbances to the natural fluvial geology of the Colorado River, with some worse than others. As the dam disrupts downstream fluxes of both water and sediment, they can have a major impact on the river downstream. Although the harm it causes to the Colorado River is great, the ability to store vast amounts of water in the arid desert states of Nevada and Arizona are much greater for humanity. Having these vast reservoirs of water in the desert has caused many conflicts between American states and Mexican states, which has led to the development of the AAC, the All-American Canal, and many more developments. Most obviously, a dam's main purpose is to slow the flow of water and provide a controlled release, having a considerably slower output of water than the river would normally have, causing dramatic alterations to many delta ecosystems. It is said in extreme cases stream flows no longer enter the sea, which is what happened to the Colorado River, as it has not been able to reach the Gulf of California since the 1960s. Dams also prevent nutrients and sediment from going downstream, which are needed for ecosystems in the lower Colorado basin. Reservoirs also heat the water as it remains stationary, increasing the overall temperature of the water. Pushing warmer water downstream could potentially kill plants and animals, if not only due to the increased temperature, but the reduced ability for the water to hold on to dissolved oxygen. Dams also focus larger volumes of water through smaller areas, increasing the velocity and causing erosions at the front face of the dam, while on the other side of the reservoir, sediment builds up against the dam, making the sides even steeper and more oleotrophic.
Water diversion by humans is done by creating channels to reroute water's flow from a source to a new destination. Anytime water is rerouted from its primary pathway to a new destination, water diversion is taking place. The primary pathways water could be getting rerouted from could be a lake, river, or reservoir. The Colorado's river primary pathways are normally diverted by dams creating reservoirs, but it can also be diverted by weirs, which aren't meant for large quantities of water. The southwestern United States has a desert-like environment. Water diversion processes destroy the environment, which is only compounded by climate change. The water of the Colorado River is essential for municipal water supplies, agriculture, and industry in the region. Up to 70% of all water in the Colorado River is diverted for agricultural purposes, but another report estimates that it is as high as 80%. The second report was quoted saying, "Human consumption of fresh water is now approaching or surpassing the rate at which water sources can naturally be replenished in many regions, creating water shortages for people and ecosystems. Overall water diversions in the Colorado River are causing scarcity."
The lower basin sees a myriad of water diversion projects. Some reroute the water from the Colorado River over 540 kilometers. There are 8 dams south of Hoover, 6 for water diversion, 2 for diversion and/or retention. On screen is an overview of the dams and reservoirs, and an image of their location in respect to Hoover and Lake Mead. The Central Arizona Project, or CAP for short, is an aqueduct completed in 1933. It spans over 541 kilometers from the southwest corner of Lake Havasu on the Colorado River to just south of Tucson, Arizona. Adding to this impressive length, the CAP system traverses an upwards elevation change of 670 meters, from 137 meters above sea level at Lake Havasu to 806 meters above sea level in Tucson. The system employs 14 pumping stations, 6 groundwater recharge areas, and 1 dam. The system is designed to provide Arizona access to its legal share of the Colorado River's water and redistribute it to the major population centers of the state. The system has some major drawbacks, which is to be expected from an aqueduct in a literal desert, the Sonoran Desert to be precise. The CAP system loses over 90 million cubic meters, which is 90 billion liters, to evaporation and seepage across the system every single year. Water losses are also expected to worsen with rising temperatures in the area, which leads to the future of the CAP's water supply being uncertain. One of the largest civil engineering feats in the USA, The All-American Canal is a 132-kilometer aqueduct that diverts water from the Colorado River to the Imperial Valley, California. The Imperial Valley sits below sea level. It was once connected to the Gulf of California and is said to have been cut off by sediment deposits at the Colorado River Delta as the river carved out the Grand Canyon. In the north of the Imperial Valley sits the Salton Basin. The whole area, including the Imperial Valley, was once said to be a harsh desert with no water in the early 1800s. Early expeditions to the area cited possibility of irrigation if water access could be secured. Thus, an early predecessor to the All-American Canal would be built, known as the Alamo Canal, which utilized the existing Alamo River for a portion of its path. Concerns began to mount over having the canal route over the border through Mexico. With large success in agriculture in the area, the US government funded the construction of the All-American Canal to secure the water within American borders. The Imperial Valley today is the 11th highest agricultural area in terms of productivity in the entire USA. The region produces vegetables, cotton, fruit, and feed crops such as hay and alfalfa. There is also a strong cattle farming industry in the region. The Imperial Valley contributes large amounts of food to the national supply chain of the USA and beyond. This is all possible only by way of artificial irrigation from the Colorado River's water. As drought increases in the area, the future of the Imperial Valley is in jeopardy. The Great Flood. The story of the Imperial Valley is not all sunshine and rainbows. The current-day Salton Basin in the north of the Imperial Valley contains a standout feature, the Salton Sea. In the monograph, Geology of the Imperial Valley by Eugene Singer, the incidents that paved the way for the formation of the Salton Sea are summarized. As aforementioned, the Imperial Valley was a large desert devoid of all water, and thus the Alamo Canal was constructed. In the early days of farming before the All-American Canal, flooding in the region was a large issue, but it was ignored. The Alamo Canal lacked the extensive damming and flow control as seen on the modern-day Colorado River, and thus the river was still able to carry large amounts of sediment to the delta. In the spring of 1905, a large snowpack in the headwaters of the Colorado River caused large flash floods across the basin along with large amounts of flow. As the Imperial Valley sits below sea level, the river eventually diverted into the Alamo Canal due to the delta being blocked with sediment deposits. This was compounded by an effect known as tidal bore, which more dense seawater began pushing upstream into the river, causing even more water to be diverted into the Alamo Canal and subsequently the Imperial Valley. In the summer of 1905, it was said that over 80% of the flow from the Colorado was being diverted into the Imperial Valley, forming the Salton Sea. In spring 1906, the Salton Sea was 65 kilometers long by 20 kilometers wide, with water levels continuing to rise by 20 centimeters per day. Today, the Salton Sea is highly saline due to the bedrock geology of the region and is said to be nearly 2/3 as saline as the ocean. Compounding the bedrock geology, wastewater and agricultural runoff from the Imperial Valley are depositing even more soluble salts and chemicals such as fertilizers. The issue remains today, and the Salton Sea is unsuitable for consumption or use in any way. Recent concerns cite issues as the Salton Sea begins to dry up, exposing lakebed areas saturated in these chemicals. The Salton Sea has lost 1/3 of its water in the last 25 years, causing the remaining water to ramp up concentration of toxic chemicals and salts. As the previous lakebed dries up, it is blown away as toxic dust into the surrounding area. The Salton Sea is the end result of a monumental mistake in early anthropogenic intervention in the lower basin, and it seems that the most serious ramifications are just starting.
Riparian zones are very important for rivers as they lock and absorb excess water and nutrients carried by storm runoff, stabilizes water movements, slows down erosion processes, influences water's temperature by providing shade, and provides areas of diversity and habitats for plants and animals. The Colorado River has lost up to 51% of its riparian zones over the past 20 years in some areas in the lower basin. The decrease in riparian zones open up faster pathways for contaminants and sediments to enter the river. It also allows for less water to infiltrate the ground and be put into the atmosphere via transpiration. The U.S. National Park Service found that riparian zones are the most biologically rich parts of a landscape. due to their density of plants and animals. However, they make up 2% of the landscape. Riparian zones rely on both ground and surface water to thrive. As seen in the image, the available water is dropping and the water consumption is rising over time. And as of 1975, there has been points where water consumption has been more than that of available water in the basin. This huge demand for water affects the water table and alters baseline flow of the river, along with damaging and destroying riparian zones. Decreased river flow affects the health of all aquatic species, especially fish, which can lead to the species dying off in the area over time. Once the species dies off, it creates a hole, which is normally filled by an invasive species of plant or animal. Overall, the ecosystems on the Colorado River are directly impacted by the increasing number of anthropogenic stressors that land use changes cause. Overall threat to the lower basin. COMITE conducted a comprehensive threat assessment of the Colorado River's watershed, identifying various threats including pollution, flow regulation, stream connectivity, geomorphology, and climate change. The lower basin is most affected by climate change, with Lake Havasu Mojave experiencing the highest annual precipitation loss. Benthic macroinvertebrates and fish populations were negatively impacted in areas where the annual precipitation levels dropped. In research done by Hung, they simulate that the basin could see droughts between 13 and 30 years in the future. Hung suggests that the future of the basin depends on sustainable water usage plans by farmers.
The Colorado River and the Colorado River Basin are the lifeblood of the American Southwest, converting a barren desert wasteland into an oasis along its vast watershed of perennial, intermittent, and ephemeral waterways. Due to anthropogenic influences and poor management, this important resource is dwindling and is highly contested. Dams and canals have been built in the pursuit of retaining this precious natural resource in the desert. The result of these structures is the changing natural function of the watercourse known as the Colorado River. The amount of sediment reaching the delta area is vastly reduced, and the stream connectivity for wildlife to migrate up and down the river is entirely cut off in several places. The demand for water in the southwestern states has put too much strain on the Colorado River with its growing population and excessive agriculture. The Colorado River is now typically unable to reach the ocean, and the water being used tends to outweigh the water supplied by the river. With such extreme levels of anthropogenic influence, the wildlife areas and landscapes that do still exist have been radically changed on a human timescale rather than their normal geologic timescales. With numerous examples having been outlined, it can be said that human intervention in the lower basin has significantly changed the landscape and ecology of the region for the worse, purely because of the expansion of human civilization. Thanks for watching!